Hey, Mike here, ZERMELOmusic.com, and in this video I want to show you a technique for catchier bass lines. There's tons of techniques out there, but we're just going to focus on one, and that is directional melodies. What is meant by directional melodies? Melodies that go in a specific, clear direction. There's three kind of general shapes that a melody can take. Of course, melodies can be a lot more complex, but in general, they can go up, so they move up in pitch. They can be flat in pitch, and a flat in pitch melody is a melody that's going to kind of dance around the tonic, which is the first note in the scale. Okay, not a lot of pitch movement, sometimes just one note, but it can dance around a little bit, okay, but that's a flat melody. And then we also have down melodies, and down melodies move down in pitch. Okay, now in this video, we're not going to look at flat melodies because flat melodies aren't catchy in the way that we're thinking. I'm thinking of catchy in terms of someone humming a melody, so something that has a little bit more pitch movement. And flat melodies tend to be a little bit more rhythmic. Now, of course, a rhythm can be catchy, right? If you think of like a baseball game and you have those little clapping moments, those are catchy moments. But that's not what we're talking about when we're talking about directional melodies. So we're going to focus on up and down melodies. Now this might seem very simple, right? Just write a melody that goes up or write a melody that goes down. There's a little bit more under the hood, which we're going to go over in a little bit. But first, let's check out some examples of what we mean by up and down melodies. Alright, so we checked out some examples. The remainder of the video is going to be based on three things. We're going to look at catchy theory, and that's basically what makes something catchy, at least when it comes to up or down melodies. We're going to try to understand that a little bit more. Then we're going to go into the underlying music theory, and then we're going to jump on the computer and look at making some actual bass lines using these techniques. Alright, so with catchy melody, we're just going to cut right to the chase. What are the big ideas? With up melodies, why are they catchy? Well, they build tension by moving away from the tonic. So up melodies, they start on the tonic note and then they move away from it. They move up and away from it, and moving away from the tonic builds tension. If you think of like the risers or in a build section in a track, the white noise risers, the tonal risers, they're moving up in pitch, and that creates anticipation for some future event, for example, in that case. But here, that rising in pitch creates the same kind of tension, all right? And down melodies do the opposite. They resolve tension by moving down towards the tonic. And again, the tonic is the first note in the scale. Okay, so they start away from the tonic and then they move down towards the tonic and they resolve that energy that way. Okay, so what about that makes it catchy? And the catchy part of it is, number one, it's a clear direction, all right? So that's easy to digest as a listener. The melody is going down or the melody is going up. That's simple, okay? But also there's a transformation or an evolution, you can say. And this is what I mean. So up melodies, they start in a stable state and then they evolve, transform, or move into an unstable state. And that's very cool, okay? Even though it sounds really simple, it's really cool. And then down melodies, again, do the opposite. They start in an unstable state, all right, away from the tonic note. They start in instability, and they move towards a state of stability, okay? And it's this transformation or the evolution that makes something catchy. All right, if you think about, for example, it's like fundamental emotion, right? So if you're in an airplane and you're just about to take off, you feel the tension, right? You're in a stable place, and you know all of a sudden you're just going to start going up into the air, right? Okay, and that liftoff creates tension. Okay, it creates anticipation. Of course, at the top, when you're able to walk around again, that tension goes away, but it's that lifting feeling, moving from stability to instability, right? We're taking off, you know, let's hang on a second. That's the emotion that up melodies can create. And the opposite, when you're landing in an airplane, right? Some people can't even handle that, right? Some people can't even handle the liftoff, but that's the point. It's emotional, fundamentally. And same thing with landing. You feel the anticipation, it's coming, finally you land and you feel much better, all right? But that's kind of the underlying emotion between up melodies and down melodies. And so they're catchy because number one, again, they're very simple. You're either going up, you're going down. That's something that the listener can easily understand and memorize. But two, you're tapping into some fundamental emotions here of just simple tension release structures, but they're structured in a very directional and clear way. All right, hopefully that wasn't too much of a mouthful, but here's the next part, okay? So it's not just about moving up in the scale. It's not just about moving down in the scale. It's all about how you build and resolve tension. And that's where we need to start looking at the underlying music theory, understanding the notes and the scales and how we can use the notes and the scales and the relationships to really make that up or down movement more interesting and catchy, okay? So on the music theory side, there's two questions we need to look at. What notes should we use? And then second, how should we use them? Okay, so how should we use them in an effective way and to make it catchy? Okay, so with what notes should we use? There's two scales that are extremely popular in house music, especially tech house music. And the first scale is going to be the natural minor scale. You'd probably just know this as the minor scale. There are other minor scales like harmonic and melodic, but we're just going to focus on the natural minor because it is by far 95% of the house music or tech house is going to be in a natural minor scale. And we're also going to look at the Phrygian mode. You may or may not have heard of Phrygian mode. Is definitely something you've heard in tracks, okay? We'll get there in a second. It sounds intimidating, but it's super easy. So natural minor, okay? It's really important that you know how to figure out what notes to use in your track. Okay, so for example, let's say you have a kick hitting at 49 hertz. That's a G, and you're thinking, man, okay, maybe I'll try writing in G minor. Okay, so what notes are in G minor? Of course, you could Google it, but it's better if you're just able to figure it out yourself. Okay. One other thing, a little side note there, is that your kick doesn't always have to be in key with your track, especially with like your kick doesn't always have to be in key, with your bass line, for example. If you're having a 909 kick, there's not really a discernible pitch a lot of the time because a 909 kick is a slow pitch roll. But if you're using like an 808 kick, then it is more important that you have your kick and bass be in the same key because the 808 is more of a tonal sound. And so it can end up being or contributing to the low end melody, not just the bass melody, but the kick becomes part of the bass melody and together they're the low end melody, okay? So just a little aside, but let's get back to the point here. How do you figure out what notes are in a minor key once you decided, okay, let's write in G minor, let's write in F minor, or whatever. And we use something called the minor scale formula. And the minor scale formula written here, it just tells you how to get from one note to the next in the scale. These numbers right here are the notes in the scale, also known as scale degrees. And the minor scale formula tells you how to get from one to the next. And it's very simple. It's just whole step, half step, whole step, whole step, half step, whole step, whole step. You can see it's very easy to memorize because you have these two groups right here. Whole step, half step, whole step. That repeats. Whole step, half step, whole step. And then you have this seventh wheel, this little straggler whole step, okay? I'm gonna say it one more time. Whole step, half step, whole step, whole step, half step, whole step, whole step. If you want to be a really good student or whatever, write this down in the comment section below the video, okay? Let's do a quick example of how we can figure out the notes in a scale using A minor, okay? So if we start on A, that's the first note in the scale. From A, we go up a whole step. So from A, we land on B, okay? And a whole step is just going up two notes in the piano roll, for example. A half step is just going up one little note in the piano roll, okay? So we went from A to B. So B is the second scale degree here. And so to get from 2 to 3, we go up a half step. So from B, we go up to C. Okay, C is the third scale degree, then we go up a whole step and we land on D. D is the fourth scale degree, we go up another whole step and that's going to land on E. E is the fifth scale degree, we go up a half step and that takes us to F. And from F, which is number 6, we go up a whole step to G. And from G, seventh scale degree, we go up another whole step and that takes us back to A. Okay? And so that's exactly how you use the minor scale formula to derive the notes in any given minor key. As long as you start with the first note, you can figure out the rest of the notes, okay? So these are what notes to use. Last thing we'll do is just cover the Phrygian mode. And the Phrygian mode, all you have to do is figure out the natural minor scale, take the second scale degree, and flatten it, okay? So A Phrygian would be this, A, B flat, okay? C, D, E, F, G. And we'll leave off A, obviously, because we're in the key of here, A. Okay? And so that's all you have to do with Phrygian mode. Okay, but this right here, the flat second scale degree, that's the interesting note in Phrygian mode. And you've heard this a lot, okay? So here's an example that's going to tie everything together. One of the most catchy bass lines that I've heard in a long time, it uses the Phrygian mode and it's a down melody. Now what is it? It's Stop It by Fisher. Okay, it's written in the Phrygian mode and it's a down melody. Okay, so if that doesn't convince you that this stuff is kind of important and cool to learn, then I don't know what will, because that bass line is super catchy. Okay, anyway, so those are the notes we should use. Okay, of course you can do whatever you want. You can use a major key, you can use whatever, but these are the most popular notes to use. Okay, and so now we want to know, how do we use them? How do we understand these scales and use them in a way to create catchy bass lines? And the first thing we have to do is look at consonances and dissonance, or consonant notes and dissonant notes in the scale. So the consonant notes are ones that just sound stable. Remember, going back to stability and instability? So the stable notes in the scale that just sound good, no matter what. They just sound right, they feel at home, they don't really want to go around, move around too much. The stable notes are 1, 3, 5. So scale degrees 1, 3, 5. So in A minor, A, C, and E. Okay, those are the most stable notes. Okay, and then the dissonances are almost all the other ones, so 2, 4, 6, and 7. And they're dissonant because they're unstable. They create tension. They create internal tension in the scale. Okay, just again, going back to stability and instability, you can leverage these notes to create these unstable and stable moments in your bass lines. Okay, that's why this stuff is cool here. Okay, so what does it mean that these notes have tension? Well, it means that they want to go somewhere. Okay, these notes right here, they don't want to stay there. They want to go somewhere. So there's motion, you could think, built into these notes. And if you hover on a note, for example, that wants to move somewhere, it's tense because someone's like, dude, this note has to resolve. Maybe they're not thinking that consciously, but they're like, oh, this is unstable. And then finally you resolve somewhere and it feels really good. Okay. So for example, a boring bass line would be, for example, 1, 3, 5. Now that's an up melody, like I said, but I said there's more to it under the hood than just simply going up. You want to leverage, again, these consonances and dissonances in an interesting way. So for example, 1, 2, 2, 2, 5. Now that's an up melody, but it's interesting because we're hovering on the second scale degree, and that's a lot of tension. In fact, most of the bass line that I just said is 2. So we're really honing in on that tension in the second scale degree. So 1, 2, 2, 2, 5. That's really cool. Then you get that melodic leap from 2 to 5, which is cool. And then you go back to 1. So 1, 2, 2, 5, 1, 2, 2, 5. That would be an interesting thing to try. And then maybe a down melody, for example, is just a general down shape. We don't have to like walk down a scale. We can go up a little bit, but as long as it has a downward motion. So for example, if we went 7, 3, go up to 4 and then back down to 1, that would be a down melody. So generally going down, but think about how cool that is, right? So the 7th scale degree, there's some tension there. Then we resolve it to a slightly stable tone, the 3rd scale degree. Then we go up to the 4th scale degree, which is kind of tense. And then we move down to 1, okay? And so that would be an interesting bass line or notes to play with because it's going down, but it's also leveraging the constant dissonant tension release energy that's found within the scale. So that would be cool. So this is all in theory, but you can see how using these things will help you kind of level up the tension and release inside the bass lines. And that's what makes things interesting and catchy. Okay, so that's consonant notes and dissonant notes. And the last thing we want to look at here is the half-step relationships in the key. The half steps are so much fun, and it's really what gives a scale its character. It's really what defines one scale versus another. We could see that the half-step relationships in natural minor occur right here between the 2nd and 3rd scale degrees, so between B and C. And I'm going to get a different color here. So between B and C, okay, that's a half-step relationship. Also between 5 and 6, so between E and F. So these are where the half-steps belong or exist in the natural minor scale. But in the Phrygian mode, they're different, okay? It's between the 1st and the 2nd, and then it's also between the 5 and the 6. So for example, a down melody in natural minor, you might want to go 6, 5, 1. Okay, that would be really cool. Or in Phrygian, you might want to do what Fisher does, which would be 3, 2, 1, and then he dances kind of around 7 and 2 for a little while. But the 3, 2, 1, okay, that's a Phrygian sound right there. And then right here, the half steps. In natural minor, the important one, like I just said, is 6 to 5. And then in Phrygian, the important relationship is going from 2 to 1. And you can see that is a specific motion, okay? 6 is an unstable tone, so it wants to resolve to 5. 2 is an unstable tone, so it wants to resolve to 1 in Phrygian. And so that's the basic idea here with the half steps. Is just kind of play around with those, because that's really what will bring out an interesting sound in the bass line. One last thing I want to cover here, just covering consonances, dissonances, and half steps, is the general idea of resolution. Where do the notes in general want to go within the scale? Okay, so here with the dissonances, I said these want to go somewhere. Well, where do they want to go? Any of these can resolve to the first scale degree, and it's going to sound good because the first scale degree is the home bass. Okay, but 2 in natural minor wants to go to 3 because, again, it's a half step away. Okay, it wants to resolve to the closest stable tone. So 2 wants to resolve to 3. In natural minor, and Phrygian, where does 6 want to resolve to? Well, 6 is only a half step above 5, so it wants to resolve to 5. So if you play with that natural resolution, it's going to feel good. And 7 wants to go to 1, okay, in both Phrygian and natural minor. Okay, and what about 4? 4 is interesting because it can literally resolve to any of the stable tones and it sounds equally good in any direction, okay? And that's why 4 is such a useful scale degree, such a useful sound, because it has tension built into it, but it can go anywhere in the scale, and that's what's so cool about it. The 4th scale degree is probably one of the most popular tension tones that's used in bass lines. So for example, Patrick Topping's B sharp, it's not an up or down melody, but it goes bump, 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 bump. That is literally just jumping up to the 4th scale degree and back. So it's just creating a moment of instability and then it's resolving, but it's jumping up to the 4th scale degree because it's an exciting motion and it's such a useful note, okay? So that's it. One last thing, again, the Phrygian mode, where do the notes want to go? Well, 2 wants to go to 1. Okay, and 6 wants to go to 5, 7 wants to go to 1, and 4 again can go anywhere. It can go to 1, 3, or 5, okay? But that's really the theory, the music theory, the catchy theory, and let's go ahead and start using this stuff by looking on the computer and making some bass lines. All right, so we are in the session now. We're going to write some bass lines. We're going to use some of the theory that we just looked at on the whiteboard, and we're going to use that to write some bass lines here, some catchy bass lines. Now, because they're catchy bass lines, we're assuming that they are the hook in the track. And so what I've done is I've put together a sparse beat here because we want to open up space for that catchy bass line. All right, so let me play the beat really quick. And I'm just going to use a bass sample for this video because this isn't about sound design, plus samples sound great. And so let me play it with the beat really quick just to show you what it sounds like. So super deep and growly. Now I'm playing a D sharp because before this I figured out that that really sounds good with the beat. Now you might be wondering if D sharp works with a kick. So if we come over to the kick, we can check to see what it's doing. You see, this is a 909 style kick, right? It just has a slow pitch roll. You can see the pitch roll. Okay, and it stops. You can say maybe right around here, so maybe a B. Okay, if this has a pitch, maybe it's a B. But B happens to be in the key of D sharp, and that's the next thing that we're going to do now is just use the minor scale formula to work out the D sharp minor scale. So starting with D sharp, we have to go whole step, half step, whole step, whole step, half step, whole step, whole step. All right, so here we are with D sharp. Let's copy a note up a whole step. There we go. Then we go up a half step, and then we go up a whole step, and a whole step, half step, whole step, and then whole step, okay? And these are the notes in the key of D sharp minor, okay? D sharp, now this says F, but technically it's an E sharp. We're not gonna worry about that. D sharp, E sharp, F sharp, G sharp, A sharp, B, C sharp, and then back up to D sharp. Okay, so this is D sharp natural minor. If we wanna make this D sharp Phrygian, well, all we have to do is take the second scale degree and flatten it. So all we have to do is drop it down there. So D sharp Phrygian is going to be D sharp E, that is correct, then F sharp, G sharp, A sharp, B, C sharp, D sharp, all right? And so that's all we have to do. We're just going to stick with those two notes, and we're going to cover examples that look at both natural minor and Phrygian. So let's just get right into it. I think in the video what I said was I gave an example of an up melody that went 1 2 2 2 5. So let's start with that idea here, and I'm just going to kind of jam out on the keyboard using those notes for a second, and let's just come up with a quick little bass line. And let me fix this up really quick. Cool. All right, so this is the bass line. We have 1 and then 2 and then 5. Okay, so 1's going up to 2, and then we hang out on this instability, and then we jump up to 5. Again, that's kind of an exciting melodic leap, and then we resolve back to 1. All right, so it sounds like this. That's pretty cool. And then maybe what we could do is in one of these, we can just do a slight variation at the end. And instead of jumping up to 5, which is a stable tone, remember it's a consonance in natural minor and Phrygian, what we could do is maybe in the second run, we can jump up to an unstable tone. So there's a little bit more instability the second time around, and it makes it a little bit more exciting. So one thing we could do is 5 to 7, right? So we can do something like this. Check this out. 5 to 7. So the 7th scale degree is going to be a C sharp right here. Okay, check this out. All right, something like that. Maybe this is just better if we do it after 4 times around. But yeah, it's just different things to try. And so this is very simple. It's just walking. It's an up melody, right? We're moving away from the tonic, and that builds tension. And you can feel that tension get resolved when we land back down on the tonic. And this is just another way of increasing the tension. We're doing a quick little leap right here, and that's a little bit tense, a quick little rhythm at the end. But we're also jumping up to an unstable tone here, or a dissonance in the scale. And I kind of like just this. Cool, so that's the first bass line, and that one's very simple. Just an up melody. We're using 1 tension tone really, and that's the 2nd scale degree. We're jumping up to the 5, resolving back to the 1. So I'm just gonna duplicate this down, and we'll come up with a different one. Now what we'll do is something in Phrygian mode. So remember, in Phrygian mode, the important note is the 2nd scale degree, because there's a half-step relationship between the 1st and 2nd scale degree in Phrygian. We're looking at natural minor right here, and you can see there's a whole step relationship between the 1st and 2nd scale degree right here. But if this was Phrygian, this would actually be an E. Okay, so we would just be dropping this note. So we'll do something similar, but what we really want to do, kind of like what we did in this bass line, is hang out on that tension tone. And in Phrygian, there's going to be an extra effect because that 2nd scale degree is a tension tone, but it's also a really unique tone because it's just a half step above the tonic. And so we'll do something similar here, but we really want to highlight that sound. And so maybe we'll just hang out on that note, that 2nd note right there, for quite a while. Okay, so let's do a little jam sesh real quick and see what we come up with. All right, cool. And so here is the bass line. Check it out. See if you like it. All right, so something like that. Now, what I was doing earlier before, actually, I had this note down. And that's kind of cool too, but I really want to highlight that movement from the 1st to the 2nd scale degree, and having it land on a downbeat like this just kind of doesn't make it stand out as much. So I figured I'd have it come in on kind of like an off position, because it's kind of like an off note, so it makes it stand out a little bit more. But you can see I'm really just hanging out on that 2nd scale degree, and you can see it's just a half step above the tonic just like that. So that's the Phrygian sound. And then at the end, kind of like the first bass line, we're just jumping up for some flavor. It is an up bass line, so we're getting that nice leap up. And then over here, I just leaped up a little bit higher to the 5th scale degree. This is the 4th scale degree, and then we're leaping up here to the 5th scale degree. And so let's go ahead and just check it out one more time. So pretty simple, but I think it's catchy, right? I mean, I think it's pretty catchy. I think that's all I could say about it. Let's check out the first one real quick again, see if that one's catchy. Yeah, see, I could listen to that, but it doesn't get boring. Like if this was just the third scale degree, for example, like if it was just, we jumped up to G sharp, yeah, F sharp, yeah. So this is a stable tone, right? It's a tonic chord tone, but it's the third scale degree. It's one of the consonants. But if we just drop it down to the second scale degree, this scale degree wants to go somewhere. And so it has that tension built in. This one doesn't. And so if we repeat that over and over, it kind of gets old and stale, but this one really doesn't. Again, because you have that tension release kind of structure built in. And so one note makes a huge difference. And this is, again, catchy. It's an up melody, very simple to memorize and understand, but it doesn't get stale because you're using these interesting notes. For this final example here, what we need to really do is focus on how the notes actually really want to go somewhere. So in the whiteboard part of the video, we saw that 2 wants to go to 3 in natural minor. So we'll stick with natural minor. And then another way to pull out the natural minor sound is to go from 6 to 5. And so let's write a bass line that highlights both of those movements, the 2 to 3 movement and the 6 to 5 movement. And so let's just jam something out, record it in. All right, cool. So you can see this is kind of like an up melody within an up melody. So the general contour eventually goes up like over here at the end, but you can see we have these little up melodies inside of it. And so that's kind of cool. Now, I did say that we want to do the 2 to 3 movement, and we have that right here, 2 to 3 in natural minor. Okay, the 2 wants to resolve to 3. But I also went up in the end, so I went from 5 to 6. So we're going from 5, a stable tone, to a 6, an unstable tone. This creates a little bit of instability before we resolve. And so one thing that we could do actually is duplicate this, and on the second phrase, we can just flip these. Now, we haven't heard it yet, so let's go ahead and listen and see how this sounds. And I'm just going to stop this really quick because since this is such a low bass line, D sharp is a really low key, but it works because our kick is higher, it's a B, and so that gives us a lot of room. Our kick is sitting up here, just to give you some perspective, and our bass is way down here, so we have all this room that we could play with underneath the kick. But since this is such a low bass line, it's hard for us to actually hear tonal differences when they're really small, like these half steps right here. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to come in, zoom in quite a bit, and I'm going to drop this down to 1/28. And I'm just going to move these guys back just to put a little bit of gap between the second and third scale degree notes here. That way there's a little bit more of space between them so we can hear this movement a little bit better. And same with this. You can see it almost sounds like there's one note up at the top here. Check it out. Watch. Boom, boom, boom. It doesn't, you don't really hear a difference between them. So I'm just going to drop these guys. Just put a little bit of a gap in between them. And so I think that one's pretty catchy too. We have these very simple up melodies, but they don't really get stale because we have this satisfying 2 to 3 movement, that resolution there. And then we have this interesting movement at the end too with the 6 to 5. So we're really bringing out the natural minor sound or the Aeolian sound. And then here we're really bringing it out because we're getting that natural movement from the 6 to the 5. Start doing some down melodies now. And what we want to do is something kind of similar. Well, we start out simple. All right, so let's see. If we just stick with the 1, 3, 5, the boring notes, let's see what we can come up with a down melody. That's basically what it's going to be. So here we go. See, that's not that bad. But the question is what happens if we start introducing some other notes instead of that? Okay, so let's just record this one in, and then we'll start using the tension tone, the dissonances, and the other fun stuff that we just learned about. So here we're going 5, 3, 1. So what happens? Let's try moving these guys to the 4. So I actually like this one better. Okay, let's try moving this to the 2. So this is kind of the opposite of the up melody that we did earlier, because in the up melody we were going 1 2 5, now we're going 5 2 1, but this is pretty cool rhythm. All right, let's try changing other notes. Let's move this 5 down to 1. So I like this one better than the 5 3 1. I like the 4 3 1, and here's the 5 3 1. That sounds a little too happy compared to the 4 3 1. Why? It sounds a little bit more serious, but that's because we're building in this tension. It's getting quickly resolved here down to the 3, which is a stable tone, but this just introduces something a little bit more dark. All right, moving on, let's get a Phrygian mode going on here. So I'm going to duplicate this and just come up with a Phrygian bass line. Again, the special note in Phrygian is that second scale degree because it's only a half step above the tonic. And so that's what we want to highlight. So one of my favorite bass lines is Stop It by Fisher. So maybe he's doing 3 2 1 in Phrygian, down melody and Phrygian. So maybe we'll play with that idea really quick. Quick jam session. That's pretty cool. Record that in. All right, so here's that bass line. See, we're going 3 2 1 in Phrygian, so F sharp down to E to D sharp. And then we repeat that just with a little variation in the rhythm here. And then we get that skip up. Now the skip up is cool because if you look, we're still getting a downward motion all the way down there. You see that? So this is kind of just 2 downward little melodies here, but together they work really nicely. Again, we're getting this leap up. This is something I keep doing in these bass lines, which is funny. You can see I'm leaping up in this one, I'm leaping up in this one, leaping up in this one, and now I'm leaping up in this one here at the end. But it's cool to jump up to like an unstable tone, or any kind of leap up at the end is going to be kind of cool. And I like how this jumps higher though than the first note, because then we're still getting a downward motion after that leap, even at the start of the bass line. But you can see that the tension is getting resolved because in a downward melody, we're moving from instability or being away from the tonic down to stability, which is the tonic. Okay, so you can see we're moving towards the tonic. Same here, we're moving towards the tonic, we're moving towards the 1. And then with the up melodies, you can see we're always moving away from the tonic. And that creates interest and tension because you're moving away, and that's where the interest lies. See, again, we're moving away from the tonic. And that builds the tension. Again, here too, we're moving away from the tonic and the up melody. And for the final example, let's do what we did with the up melodies, where we look at that 6 to 5 movement too. So we've been doing a lot of 2, 3, 4, that kind of stuff. Let's do the 6 to 5 here for the down melodies as well. All right, jam session for the final one. It'd be cool if we rang out on that 6th scale degree too, just to really highlight it. All right, check this out. So you can see we are doing a generally down melody. Of course, it just has to be generally down, right? So obviously the movement from D to B to A to G, that's going down. Okay, we have this little guy down here, but that's just to make this leap a little bit more exciting, just to bring more attention to this note. This note's going to already draw attention to itself because it's the 6th scale degree. And again, that is one of the tones in the natural minor scale that really stands out. And so we're trying to hover on this guy. And so, and then we just do a walk down here, but the walk down, you can see the 6 resolves to the 5, then we get to the 4, that's a tension tone, and then we resolve to the 1. Okay, so remember, down melodies, they resolve tension by moving down towards the tonic. Here we start on the tonic, but then we quickly move away and then we walk back towards it. Okay. And I just have a little variation here in the rhythm at the end. I played that in as I was recording. I thought it was kind of cool. One thing that I just thought of here is you can see that the 4th scale degree right here then resolves to the 1. But since we have a variation over here, maybe another thing that we could do is do kind of this very small resolution between the first and the second phrase. And so here we have the 4th scale degree, but the 4th scale degree can resolve to the 3, the 1, or the 5. But what if we have it resolve down here to the 3? You see that? That's kind of interesting, right? So this one's kind of leaves it tense right at the end of the phrase, but this phrase can land a little bit more softly, okay, because this is a 3rd scale degree. So it's going to sound a little bit more like a softer landing. Let me just play it for you. Okay, here's with the 4th. Very subtle, but I think that's really cool because this one's ending on the tension tone here before the next phrase, but this one's just a softer landing by moving to the stable tone before the next phrase. And so that's kind of like you could say a higher level concept here, where you have these tension tones that don't only get resolved within the phrase, but they get resolved between 2 different phrases. So we have this 4th scale degree resolving to the 3rd scale degree over here in the second phrase. But we have the resolution here within the one phrase with the 6 to 5, right? And then here with the 6 to 5 too. It's just that cross phrases, we have this resolution from 4 to 3. And it's subtle, but I think it's really cool and I like it. But yeah, this is just kind of a look at how you can apply the things that we talked about earlier in the video with the natural minor scale and using the tension tones, the consonances, the dissonances, the half steps relationships, and specifically the half steps that are interesting or defining for the key. So the defining half step in Aeolian or in natural minor is the 6 to 5 really. And the really special one in Phrygian is going to be the 2 to 1. Okay, and so we looked at a couple examples that highlight both of those specific half steps. Plus, we looked at how we can use the tension tones to make our downward or upward bass lines a little bit more interesting and catchy. So I hope this was helpful. It's just a lot of fun to play with this stuff. If you're just not feeling inspired, but you want to come up with some kind of direction, you can always rely on this stuff to give you ideas that you maybe wouldn't have thought of otherwise. All right, so I hope that this was all helpful. Again, up melodies build tension by moving away from the tonic. Down melodies resolve tension by moving towards the tonic. And we looked at 6 examples here. You can download this session for free below this video. Thanks so much for watching. I will see you in the next video. Peace.